Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a dear friend of mine and a welcome return guest, Winston Marshall, host of the Winston Marshall Show, banjo enthusiast, co-founder of Dissident Dialogues. He handed Nancy Pelosi her ass at an Oxford debate, which was very pleasing to see if you guys haven't watched it yet, about democracy versus populism. I had the joy of spending time with him when he was in town, sadly, a few months ago now. Hopefully we'll cross paths in the very near future. Winston, there's so much I want to talk to you about. And one of the things I do want to talk to you about first and foremost is the state of Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Because American and British politics in many ways follow each other. Thatcher's election in 79 preceded Reagan in 80.
Mm-hmm.
Brexit preceded Trump's huge upset in 2016. And it seemed like it was very possible that the huge labor landslide last summer would have preceded Officer Harris winning the 2024 election here, which did not in fact happen. And I think in many ways for Americans, we're looking at the UK with this sense of there, but for the grace of God go I, because
Yes.
you guys have gone in a much different direction, and a direction which I find, frankly, quite disturbing and malevolent. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the state of Britain since Sir Keir Starmer took over number 10.
Yes, and just breaking news has been that a man has been charged for burning a Quran. This happened in February, and the judge put his judgment through, and we can get into this. But the man, whilst he was burning the Quran, was attacked by another man with a knife and kicked and spat on by a Deliveroo driver. And the judge has ruled that the fact that those two people attacked him showed that he was acting disorderly. And so now this is a de facto Islamophobic blasphemy, Islamic blasphemy laws in Britain. Now, that for me sums it up. And this is not even the first guy to be arrested for.
Wait, well, let's stop there. Hold on, because this is something very interesting and people don't understand. I didn't realize this. And this is the kind of thing where I mean, I'm going to be a little vulgar, but what it reminds me of is the guy beating his wife after when dinner isn't ready, being like, look what you made me do.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, oh, it's your, I couldn't help it. Like you're
Yes.
giving me an attitude and giving me a lip. This is horrific and insane. Please
Absolutely.
go on.
So he was an Armenian refugee who, the report is that he himself was the victim of many years of torture where he's from, and he came to Britain. And he was outside the Turkish embassy in February. And there's a video of this, so you can find it. Maybe we can cut to it. And whilst he's burning the Quran, one man runs out of the embassy with a large knife, perhaps a machete, and starts saying, "I'm going to effing kill you." And the guy sort of backs. The guy burning the Quran sort of backs up. Eventually falls over, and the guy says, "F you." And then when he falls over, a Deliveroo driver starts kicking him. The judge has decided under a Public Order Act that it's a very weird statement from the judge, because it starts by saying there's nothing wrong with criticizing Islam, but this is clearly a religious motivated hate act. Now, I think in this conversation, I'll go through with you what the situation with free speech is and why it's so drastically different to what's going on in America, because your audience will no doubt have heard about various people being arrested and doing lengthy prison sentences for tweets. And we can go into those details and why that's happened. But why this is interesting is because you might say that there's several arms to the free speech crisis, and one of them is the so-called Islamophobia arm, or new blasphemy laws. Now, the Labour government, I'd also like to get into some of the details about your intro about how Labour came to power.
Yes.
Not necessarily a true reflection of the people.
Just people don't know. They had extremely high number of seats. They have like 300, 400 out of 635, but they also had record low number of votes. It's just Britain's first past the post has this bizarre disproportionality in this election, I think, more than ever.
Well, what happened was they actually only won with 20% of the electorate.
Right? Yeah.
So the right wing split was the right wing vote was split between Nigel Farage's Reform Party, who only got 5 seats, but got 5 or 6.
I
Huh?
think wasn't it
Uh,
15%?
yes, something like that. I think 5 or 6 million votes,
Right.
um, which and they were, the party. Farage had only rejoined the party a month before, so it was all very quick paced, and that split the right wing vote. And had the right wing vote not been split, Starmer wouldn't have won. So that happened. Then Starmer, who it's a bit like if Kamala had won. He's a kind of mix of like identitarian or progressivism and old socialism, and he's also a lawyer. So he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, i.e., the judicial um, system.
Well, let me just explain to people what the vote breakdown was because it's very bizarre, right?
Mhm.
So Labor, who's in charge, had a third of the vote, but they got 400 seats out of 635, 411 seats. So they had a third of the vote and 2/3 of the seats.
But only
Uh,
20% of the electorate, because another phenomenon was the options were so bad on the ticket that many people just didn't bother voting.
Sure, but
Uh,
I mean, voters are the ones who decide. So if you
sure,
know what I mean,
sure,
in elections, and I say
yes.
this as an anarchist, the conservatives who had been in power since 2010, I think 14 years, some crazy number, they had 24% of the vote, a quarter. The Lib Dems, who were like the John Oliver people, had an eighth, 12%, and Farage had 14%. So they were in third, but he got 5 seats.
Hmm.
So the Lib Dems, this is really bizarre, had 12% of the vote, had 72 seats. Farage had 14% of the vote, had 5 seats because of how it was distributed.
Yes,
So the results are very skewed given how many votes each. It's kind of like the electoral college on steroids in a sense.
yes, exactly. So it's all that to say that it's not necessarily a reflection of Starmer isn't popular, wasn't popular when he came to power,
Right.
uh, didn't win votes beyond a Labour base, and has only gone down in popularity. So uh, one big aspect, then one big. Your viewers will have seen Starmer in the Oval Office when J.D. Vance called him out and said, worried about free speech. And Starmer snapped back, is very proud of the history of free speech to everyone at home. We were like, it wasn't even offensive. It was spit out your coffee, ridiculous statement from him. So one aspect of this is Islamophobia, and or what they call Islamophobia. I reject the
Sure.
word. I believe that there is absolutely something, the existence of anti-Muslim hatred and anti-Muslim behavior, which is unacceptable. But Islamophobia is used to that, and it incorporates criticism of Islam. Now, that's actually in paper. So at the moment, the Labour government is discussing the APPG, an all-party parliamentary group, definition of Islamophobia, which would enshrine actual criticism of the Quran and Islam and the Prophet Muhammad into law. A Labour MP, Tahir Ali, I believe his name was, literally in Parliament stood up and asked the Prime Minister in a full House whether or not there would be blasphemy laws introduced, although he said to protect all the Islamic religions. I will say, as a Christian, my faith doesn't need such protections. You
I
can
think it kind of
criticize,
does.
huh?
I think it does. I think you guys are under attack. I'm sorry. Like it's not. You don't need the protections, but it's certainly not. You're not. The Anglicans aren't being given, and the Catholics the protections that Islam is in the UK.
Sorry, what I mean to say is I criticize away. I don't think there needs to
Oh,
be any
sure, sure.
speech laws to protect. I'll add another thing. Actually, Britain actually had blasphemy laws until 2008. So,
Okay.
and this is what I don't want to get too arcane too quickly. So we'll come back. Maybe we'll come back to the detail of the history of free speech in Britain, because I think that's important, and why we diverge from America. So the Labour are currently discussing whether or not to pass through this Islamic law. Meanwhile, this man who I described, Hamit Koskan, Armenian refugee, and he has been charged. The judge literally says it's not about Islam, but it's also clearly about Islam, and says that the reaction by the man It's unbelievable that it actually gets worse. The reaction by the man with the knife showed that this man, Hamit Koskin, was clearly being an offensive, was causing an offense. And the guy with the knife who attacked him has not only not been named, but the Telegraph report, his sentencing or case has been pushed to 2027.
Wait, what? Wait. Is he arrested or is he free to walk around?
And he's out. He's free to walk around.
Wait, okay, let me break this down because sometimes people hear your accent or British accents and we think we're not understanding something, and you're talking about a lift and it's actually not for shoes, but it's an elevator. You're telling me with a straight face that someone was burning a Quran, someone attacked that person with a knife, and the assailant with a large knife, and this isn't a butter knife, he actually attacked with a knife, is roaming around the streets, identity hidden, and he's only going to face any possible charges in 2 years?
Correct. That but so as well as the free speech thing, what happens is people see this and there's a burning sense of two-tier justice in Britain. So you'll hear a lot now. Keir Starmer has been dubbed two-tier Keir,
Right.
and you can get into details and you can compare different cases, but there's a huge sense of two-tier justice where some people do some crimes and there's terrible punishment and quick punishment, and worse crimes are either ignored, completely let off, or kicked down the road, or they have much, much shorter sentences. So the other big famous case right now is that of a woman called Lucy Connolly. Now, I need to colour this in a little bit. A month after Sir Keir Starmer's election, which was July 4th last year, there was a terrible murder in Southport, where a man who was a week off before his 18th birthday, called Axel Rudakabana, entered a very, very poor part of Britain, town called Southport. He entered with a large knife a children's Taylor Swift dance party.
Right.
He what he did in there is just one of the most horrific crimes ever to have happened in Britain. As well as murdering 3 girls, he horribly stabbed up the many other girls. And basically, when this happened, the whole country was in shock and grief simultaneously. We
Sure.
couldn't contain our anger and emotion. Now,
But you could. You did contain it.
well, no. So what happened was there were some vigils, but for various reasons, a portion of the country, up and down the country, reacted in riots. So then there were riots. Now, part of the reason there were riots was that no one announced, the government or the police didn't make it clear what was happening. So there was no clarity about who the perpetrator was. Was this an Islamist attack? Why exactly this happened? Now, a week from today ago in Liverpool, a man drove a car through the Liverpool Football Club celebration procession through downtown Liverpool. He was immediately, within a couple of hours, identified as a white male aged 53. But with this case, as is always the way, i.e. it's not a white male, they don't tell you who it is.
Yeah, that's Ann Coulter's law. You know that, right?
I don't know her law. What's her law?
Ann Coulter's law is the longer the media takes to tell you the race of the assailant, the more likely it is that they're not white.
Yes, quite. So there was a failure to announce what happened.
When they identified him, they pretended he was native because he was technically born in the UK. He's from, where was his parents from?
They were Rwandan.
Rwandan, but they tried to pretend like, how are you pretending this guy's not British?
Well, there were certain rumors that went round saying he was a sort of choir boy, and then before many details were given about him, then photographs of him as a much younger boy,
Of
looking very
course.
sweet and innocent, circulated by mainstream media. And all of this really just agitated everyone even further because it was a sense of, like, just tell us the truth. Now, there's a general protocol in Europe when there's an Islamist attack. Say exactly what it is, what happened immediately, and let it be known that the authorities are dealing with it. That is the best way to deal with the righteous anger of the people. Because if they feel like that the government is actually looking after it and that there will be actual justice and that this will happen, then it way decreases the possibility of rioting. And that's generally understood by leaders. But Starmer failed to do that. Then there was speculation online. One woman tweeted, her name is Bernie. She has a handle, Bernie something. And she tweeted, if true, which was on the true, that this is a recent asylum seeker, this would be terrible. But starting if true, the police went and arrested her. So she didn't even say it was an asylum seeker, which would have been false. She said, if it's true that he's an asylum seeker, because there was rumors, the police came and saw her. So anyway, so that's one example. But the famous example was Lucy Connolly. Lucy Connolly is the wife of a conservative councillor. She has a young child. She tweeted it's a horrible tweet, but she said, in her rage, I could probably dig it out and read it if you want.
Sure. Please do.
Here we go. She tweeted, mass deportation now, set fire to all the fucking hotels, full of the bastards, for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick, knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it. So that was her tweet, which she deleted and apologized for within a few hours.
Right.
Nevertheless, she was arrested, she was charged, and she is now serving 31-month sentence for that tweet, which in America would absolutely not, it doesn't pass the Brandenburg test. And
Whoa. I think you're wrong that she would have gotten away with it necessarily in America, because all it takes is one DA who's looking to make their name. I don't know what the jurisdiction would be because it's Twitter, so I don't know if you're charged locally or federally. But if someone is saying burn down hotels with refugees, I don't think it's impossible, because you don't need you can arrest someone without actually having anything happen, just as a threat. You know what I mean? So that let them know that we're watching you. So I'm not at all positive
okay, well,
that this
that
would
might
have
be the
passed
case.
muster here.
That might be the case, but again, I don't like that. I do not like the tweet. Like, it's not nice, and so I have no pleasure in defending her.
Yes,
But
of course.
um, uh, she said, important that she said, it, what did she say? For all I care. So the language of it is like, it's clearly just her getting out her grief and her anger, which the
Sure.
entire nation felt. And um, so anyway, she's become sort of a poster girl for this. She had recently had her repeal denied, so she remains there. And then it comes to a sense of two-tier justice. So just for comparison, she's doing 31 months. There are two news from yesterday. Two Afghan men who were in charge of the illegal boat carrying across the Channel, which illegally takes people from northern France to the Channel, across the Channel to Britain. People smuggling. They were found to a mother and child died under their program, for lack of a better word, and they were each sentenced to 8 months. That was yesterday. They each got an 8-month sentence. So she's doing 31 months for this tweet, which she apologized for and deleted, and which there is no evidence that it actually directly led to any violence, let alone deaths. These two, who are responsible for 2 deaths, who are responsible for the illegal activity of bringing people across, you know, what they're doing is an affront to our borders and our sovereignty. They're getting 8 months each. So you just get all of this compounds, you see. People see this, they're not stupid, and it gives them a terrible sense that the whole system is rigged against us. So, I mean, I can list.
But they're not wrong.
They're not wrong, and it's also the case that Lucy Connolly has got a longer sentence than some of the rape gang perpetrators. I can also, I mean, so some of the other people, for example, who have got different sentences, the judge who judged Lucy Connolly should have a 31-month sentence. The same judge had previously sentenced a man called Antonio Boparan, aged 19, to 18 months for killing a girl in a car accident when he was driving 70 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. And he only ended up serving 6 months. So here's a man breaking the law, killing someone.
I think your point's taken, but where you and I disagree is I don't see this as salvageable.
You mean the country?
No, the system. The country's wait, take that back. You're never going to hear me saying the British people are done, because you guys have suffered through a lot more than we have in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I wrote about in the White Pill, something I'm keenly aware of. And the strength and resolve of the British people is of great historic import and relevance. Guys, do you know who doesn't get enough appreciation? Dads. And you know who else doesn't get enough support? Your boys. And luckily, Sheath Underwear takes care of both. If you've been listening to the show, you know that I, Michael Malice, am an underwear model, and I'm currently, right now, wearing Sheath Underwear. I wear it 24/7, even when I shower, especially when I shower, because Sheath is the AI of underwear. They have unique dual pouch technology, one pouch for one part of your male anatomy, another pouch for the other part of your male anatomy. First time you try them on, you're like, what's going on here? And then you will swear by it, as I do. And maybe you'll be on your own way to becoming an underwear model. No, you're not. You're going to have dad bod. But that's okay, because Sheath Underwear works with dad bods of all kinds, or even not dad bods, or incel bods. You know what I mean? Anyway, if you use promo code DAD30 at checkout, you get 30% off your entire order. 30% off. And then you'll be saying to me, Michael Malice, are you my daddy? And I'll be saying, how'd you get my phone number? Don't call me ever again. Go to sheath.com, use promo code DAD30, give the gift of comfort. Whether you're a dad, shopping for a dad, or just want to treat yourself, this is the move. Let's get back to the show. I had a discussion with Francis from Trigonometry about this. It is my informed opinion, and I would love to hear your thoughts, that more of the British people want this cage than you are giving them credit for.
More of the British people want the system as it is today, you mean?
Yes.
I think that you're correct, that there's a large part of the country that don't think that there is such thing as tier justice.
Right.
There's a large part of the country who think Lucy Connolly should be doing a lengthy
and I don't just mean people who are Muslim or Muslim immigrants. I mean,
oh no,
Brits.
Yeah.
Yes,
there's all progressive types.
Yes,
very much coming from the political left, who although even in that sense, it's not necessarily clear, because it might even be a more economic class or worldview thing. So the old left, people who traditionally would have been like the British equivalent of Bernie Bros, but old working class types who would have always voted left, but are culturally very British and patriotic. And there might be this is a better way of understanding the divide. It's the David Goodhart's theory of the everywheres and the somewheres. And these people are the somewheres, and they may traditionally have been left-wing voters, but they are very rooted in their community. They've been there for as long as they know their families have been there, since the Industrial Revolution. And they're very patriotic types. They're very much tied to the land. And then you have the anywheres, who are not only mobile and moving and sort of globe trotters or whatever, but they also have a globalist mindset.
Yes.
And they have a sense of tied in with a postmodernist oppressor oppressed, and so for them, even the poor white are oppressors on in certain ways.
I got I'm going to disagree with you a little bit because I do know my British history. Clement Attlee, who was I think the first Labour PM who took over from your namesake, I believe you're named after Churchill, right?
He was also followed by Church. So
No,
Church
but
was either
you're
side,
named after Winston
bookended by
Churchill,
Church.
correct?
Pardon?
You're named after Winston Churchill, correct?
I thought I was. My
Oh,
mum said apparently she disliked the name, but that's
oh,
yeah.
okay. Well, sorry, but in the wake of World War II. This is a great story. Winston Churchill, for a window, it was Britain versus Hitler alone, and it was a very scary time. World War II is discussed in triumphalist terms in the U.S., but we didn't have our capital city bombed, on a regular basis by the Nazis. The Blitz. It was a very scary period for Britain, and the Allies win. Winston Churchill goes out on the balcony and tells the huge crowd below, you can see it on YouTube, this is your victory. And the people scream to him, no, this is yours. It's this amazing moment. And then they go to the polls and vote him out. And they vote in Clement Attlee. And Clement Attlee said, this is 1946, I think he came in 45. He said, I'm a citizen of the world. This has been there for 80 years. This kind of, in the wake of World War II, we have to hate nationalism and we all have to be in each other's business. It's been a thing for a minute.
I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but Churchill himself in 1941 under it was President Roosevelt then, right?
Correct.
Roosevelt forced him to sign the Atlantic Charter, which began the decolonization program.
Right.
So even under Churchill, to some extent, that's one part of the whole package of this worldview, I think.
Yes,
That
of course.
empire and colonialism are inherently bad. There's nothing good from them
Right.
that can be taken. So yeah,
It's all oppression. There's no upside. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Right. So your point is that you think that the system is in such a way that you don't think it's salvageable. Is that the point you're making?
Correct.
Well,
because you know why? Here's why. Because the Tories have been this thing with the rape gang happened under the Tories. This judge didn't just materialize under Keir Starmer. This has been going on for a very long time. The people in power, there are a lot of them are very smart, and a lot of them very observant, and they see what they can get away with. And they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing because you push until you get resistance. And why wouldn't you? You get more power, you get more control, so on and so forth. This is what any government or any politician pretty much wants. And they're seeing if you're at the point where, girls are getting murdered in their dance studio, and people sure are a bit upset, but not upset enough that they can't handle the upsetness. At a certain point, it's just like we've won.
Yes. So I think
we the bad guys. I want to be clear. That's what I mean by we. Yes.
So where you're correct, and perhaps I can color it in, is that as well as the sort of the politicians themselves, you then have the civil service, and many politicians will complain, including Prime Minister Liz Truss, who was Prime Minister 2 years ago for about 20 minutes. She didn't last long, but she sort of explained that even if she wanted to try and get anything done, the civil service are completely rigged against her. This morning, actually, coincidentally, I was visiting the school of Catherine Burblesing, who is a very outspoken head teacher and started a free school in an impoverished part of London. And she said the civil service had been out to get her from the beginning and did everything they could to stop her because she's been affiliated with Conservative Party.
And hold on, let me give more background for this. This is exactly what Trump saw during his first term. He was naive, and I don't blame him, thinking that, okay, once I'm the president, these people are nonpartisan and the bureaucrats, and they're going to go where the president wants. And he didn't realize the level of just brazen defiance and the level of the defiance would be celebrated by the corporate press. A prime example is, someone's bragging about how many troops we had in Syria in defiance of the commander in chief, and the media were just bravo, bravo. But Winston, this has been a thing for, again, Thatcher complained about this constantly, even before she was the prime minister in 1979. So this
Well,
in America. Barry Goldwater, hold on, just finish, was complaining about this in the 70s. So this is nothing new, and there's no, for Elon Musk has not done a good job, or been able, excuse me, has not been in a position to do a good job to do anything about this.
yes, and so I'm the reason I'm coloring this in more is to try and, if we can, identify what it is we're dealing with and see whether or not it's possible to deal with it. So, as well as the politicians and the civil service, then you have the sort of lawfare arm, and
Right.
everything from the Supreme Court, which is we didn't have a Supreme Court until Tony Blair, and the CPS, and there's a famous example. I gave you another, just a great personification of the British lawfare working against Britain is a man called Philippe Sands. Now, you might remember him because he wrote, which is actually a brilliant book called East West Street, documenting his family's dealings, I think in Vienna, if I remember correctly, from the war. I think he's the progeny of Holocaust survivors. But he became a lawyer as well as an author, and represented the Chagos Islands in the international courts against Britain. And this has happened also last week. This is also just it perfectly illustrates the ideology of our Prime Minister. So the Chagos Islands is relevant to America because that is where the military naval base of Diego Garcia is, which is the refueling station. It's where all of the Gulf Wars were launched from. It's a very important military base for the Americans. In 1965, it was a couple hundred years ago, it was French. The British took it over. Tiny little archipelago in the middle of the Indian Ocean. In 1965, under a Labour Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, they moved the 1,500 or so Chagosians 2,000 miles across the ocean to Mauritius, and gave Mauritius independence, but the Chagos Islands were turned into the British Indian Ocean Territory and remained a military base, and he's dubbed it the last colony. This guy, Philippe Sands, has spent the last 20 years trying to get this out of the hands of the British and back to the Chagosians. Now, I've actually spoken to Chagosians. Yes, there was an injustice done when they were forcibly removed, but they want to be British. Some of them are served for the British. They are British in the sense that they even have a Union flag in the top corner of their flag. They are patriotically part of the British Commonwealth in that sense. This guy, who says he's British, not only did he fight against British to try and have this land taken away from Britain, he's now given it to Mauritius. And we're paying we've paid many reparations to the Chagosians, but we're now paying to rent it off them, even though it was ours. But he was caught on camera saying, well, Britain, it's one of the great things about Britain is you can spend your whole career working against the interest of the British, and then you can come home and you're celebrated for it. So this guy perfectly personifies the legal system and the individuals who have captured the sort of judicial world and who are working against British interests. Keir Starmer, it's perfectly decolonization ideology that's at play, absolutely. And Philippe Sands, in his book called The Last Colony, is absolutely explicit about it being a decolonization project. So that illustrates the legal aspect. So then there's a sort of NGO and Quango industrial complex. So there's other thing. There's a charity industrial complex, and there's all of these institutions. The institutions themselves. As I said, I was at a school this morning, and the head mistress was yelling at me because she's like, everyone's at the best. They're focusing on the universities. Oh, the Marxists have taken over the universities. She's like, what about the bloody schools? They've taken over all the schools. All your children are being indoctrinated in this anti-British ideology. She's ridiculed because she has all the students, of whom, by the way, I think the majority are Muslim, and very, very few white kids in there. She has all of them singing the national anthem before the the Union flag every morning. She actually has created unity amongst her multicultural. She's found a meta culture, which is Britishness, to unite the multicultural of her students. But she is ridiculed, and she's saying, it's not. It's you're worried about the universities. What about the schools? And it's if this is how the schools. If she's the only school like this, what are we going to expect in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Like, this is how we're indoctrinating our children. So the future is, from that, without a revolution of the education system, the future looks pretty bleak as well. So I say all this to support your argument that we're in a pretty bad place. Then the question would be, like, what is possible about changing it? And a great example, like, Musk wasn't able to change it in the way he hoped, and it seems like there's still factions at play fighting against the mandate given to Trump. In Britain, you'd have to come in with a plan to just wipe a lot of the civil service out. Anyone who goes against, you need to give more power to the politicians who have been given the mandate from the people, take it away from the civil service, and then so that they'd have to, hypothetically, they can do that. If you vote the right political party in who are competent, and that's another question, but if you could vote the right party in who are competent, they could hypothetically do a big clear out. But there needs to be analysis. Now, the best people working on or speaking out on this is Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings was Boris Johnson's kind of right-hand man, but he, massive fallout with Johnson, hates him now, very outspoken about all his problems. But this guy has been explaining the problem with the civil service in tremendous detail for some time. So there are some people who understand the scope of the problem. Whether all of these people can come together, that's another problem. Is the right is so fractured. And there's 4 years until the next election. So there is some time for them to pull together. But whether they can actually pull together, there is some talent, not a lot of talent. There's some talent who might be able to find that short path through to the other side before it becomes, I mean, I guess it's a sort of United Nations airport otherwise.
I completely disagree. I don't think there's a possibility of we're going to vote in the right people and fix this. I don't think there's enough appetite in the British electorate to vote in anyone. Liz Truss, she was PM for, I think, a month. She had her bill to reform the budget was tepid. It was not. It was portrayed as the most radical thing since Guy Fawkes, and she was driven out of office. So we did see reform. For people who don't know, Britain recently had local elections, and for the first time, I think ever, the Conservatives, who have the most seats, came in fourth. And Labour came in third. It was Nigel Farage's victory completely. His Reform Party came in first. Second place was the Lib Dems, then Labour, then the Conservatives. I don't see any reason, as an outsider, why anyone would vote Conservative at this point after whatever 11, 14 years, however long it was. Where what is their what have the Conservatives improved? You had the mandate. You had 4 PMs, you have nothing, literally nothing to show for it except shitlib policies from start to finish. But I don't, even if you had Farage right now with 400 seats in Parliament, I think it's only going to mitigate the damage. And I think I have to choose my words very carefully. And I know you're not going to agree, and that's fine. And it's easy for me to say this on this side of the pond, but if you're at the point where people are going to jail for tweets, we are past the point, in my opinion, for civil solutions.
And you might be inclined to, as an anarchist, come to that conclusion. Now, I could speak at length about the deep contempt I have for the Conservative Party. They turbocharged a lot of this stuff. I think actually a lot of it started with Labour under Blair and Brown, but it's absolutely turbocharged. The immigration crisis, absolutely turbocharged, particularly under Boris Johnson, as Boris wave. The grooming gang stuff started a long time before the Tories, but very much they did diddly fuck all about it. Right. But then the question is about reform and Farage. Now, Farage is I think unquestionably the greatest campaigner and political actor in Britain, and perhaps in the last 100 years, perhaps ever. I'd need to see a better example.
Okay.
But
She's right there. Go ahead.
can he govern now? There's hope there. Another problem is that can they get the talent surrounding him? It's not enough just to have one talented
Right.
guy. You actually have to have a whole team, a squad, like a whole troop
Yep.
of real talent. Now, it seems to me that those types might slowly come to the
Yes,
fore.
that's possible.
And one of them already has. His name is Zia Youssef, who is the chairman. He made a lot of money in a tech startup. Deeply impressive dude. And he this week launched the Reform Doge. So what they're doing is they got all these councils that they won. He's going in with a Doge program of volunteers that he rates from where exactly he's found them, and he's going to try and cut all this enormous spending from the councils. So these guys, it shows to me that they're in a position now. They've got all these new councils. We'll see now if they can do it. If they can pull this off, it's evidence that they are actually able to deliver and do something good. It's kind of a test. It's a good test
That's
for
true.
them on that. So we'll see that. Hopefully, they can be more successful than Musk and his project. So that's to be seen. Another thing that seems to be, as well as finding the rest of the talent to fill the benches, is can they get along with Farage? And I think that it's not clear that there was a mini reform civil war with one of the 5 MPs whose name was Rupert Lowe. Big falling out with Farage, very messy, and now he's an independent MP. It also happens at the council election. There was a by-election, so there's now a 5th Reform MP. Another woman was voted in, so they
She
still
won by
have
6 points, 6 votes, right? Something crazy like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that Yusuf would be a good example of Farage finding a great talent. And keep an eye on this UK Doge thing. It won't make the news, and certainly in America. It will barely make it here in the UK. But it's a test. It's like, okay, they're serious. And I've spoken to Yusuf several times, and every time I come away from chatting to him, I'm extremely impressed. He's thinking about all the right things. He recognizes all the right problems, and because he comes from a tech background, because he comes from an entrepreneurial background, he's not like the rest of these politicians who are just climbing a ladder. He's like, I've actually got to deliver on this. So his mindset is absolutely correct, and I think you'd get on with him in the same sense. Because
Wait, so I'm sorry, you're telling me that like a Boots version of Elon Musk is going to do a better job than Elon Musk did?
Well, you put it like that. I don't think it's fair to say he's a Boots version, but
he's certainly not the whatever Jaguar version.
We're all Boots compared to Elon Musk.
Correct.
He's an unfathomable talent.
Right.
So,
and he couldn't do it.
Look, I tell you what. Why do you think Musk failed? That'd be interesting. I'd love to know what you think about why is it that it
because it's systemic. Because I don't think there's the appetite in Washington, because Elon does not have the power. Elon can't just be like, all right, we're cutting. You have to go through Congress here and Parliament, obviously, in the UK. And there is no appetite when I'm running for the House or the Senate to have massive or even marginal cuts in the budget, because if there was, both parties would be running on it.
So that was it failed at Congress. That was the problem.
That's part of it. Yeah, sure. And but it also fails with the populace. People like the idea of budget. Like, it's like this. People could sit in their house and be like, you know what, I'm spending too much. But every single thing that they buy, there's some reason. They're just buying things at random. They're going to have some rationalization. So it's perfectly possible mentally to have two contradictory things where I'm spending too much money, Well, not this, not this, not this, not this, not this. In the same way that people despise Congress, but not my congressperson, they understand me. I'm certainly not going to vote for the other party. And if you did vote for the other party, what would be the difference anyway? So I'll tell you what my answer is, and you're not going to like it, and I don't expect you to like it. And I don't know if you're in a position to like it. And it's this: in the 1920s, we had a huge abridgment of freedom here called prohibition, where it was illegal to buy or sell or consume alcohol of any kind. And it was a constitutional amendment. And there was a senator who said it'll be easier for a hummingbird to fly to, I think it was Mars, Jupiter, I don't remember, with the Washington Monument tied to its tail than to have this overturned. And it led to a huge contempt for the law because there was this two-tier system. Because in cities, the cops just became corrupt. The bars would just pay them off, right? They looked the other way. And in rural areas, it was actually maintained. And things got more and more violent because you have bootleggers, you have the feds trying to stop the bootleggers are fighting the feds. It was when you had the rise of things like Dick Tracy and all these comic strips about the good cops fighting these gangsters, and the rise of Al Capone and gangster culture here in the States became a real thing. It was a horrific period in many people's in our lives. Well, actually, Dick Tracy came later. I take that back. I think it was 36. Point being, at a certain point, it got so violent that the cops were like, we're not doing this. Now, this isn't like the official story, but the number goes up of violence. And at a certain point, the politicians were like, all right, we're just going to repeal this. And they pulled it back. So until people start literally fighting back, any organization that is oppressive is going to keep turning the screws. Why wouldn't they?
Well, it's also the case that as well as there being more and more riots, there is also more and more conversation about the possibility of some sort of civil war. Famously, a King's College professor called David Getz has just written at length about this and how it might come about. And it does seem like Britain is being increasingly balkanized. There are whole areas, enclaves, where they not only have a different language, they have a different justice system. We have 85 Sharia courts across the country.
And you're also being told this isn't real and this is just propaganda, and you're talking out of your ass by the press, I'm sure.
Yeah. What was so exciting about the Trump victory, or one of the things that was exciting about the Trump victory from my point of view, was that the Overton window was yanked overnight.
Yes.
And it was quite astonishing. I was in New York at the time, and I remember a period where you just wouldn't dream of even talking about the positive aspects of Trump policy, let alone wear a MAGA hat.
Right.
And I saw at the second victory, young people wearing MAGA hats in Soho in New York.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I never saw that when I lived there. Holy crap. I left into 2021. That's a very interesting information. Okay. Wow. Okay.
There's a part of that demographic where it actually became rebellious and cool.
Yeah.
And so if you just think about how that happened, I think it's also possible that an Overton window can slowly shake an edge, and then it can be yanked a whole way. And now, right now, slow edging, there's some edge in the discourse. Like there's a lot of conversation about remigration, which I'm very nervous about that conversation.
People don't know what this is. This is something that is very controversial. It's mainly discussed in Germany through the AfD. And what remigration is to deport people some of whom are even born in that country back to the nations of their supposed origin. Marine Le Pen and the National Rally in France, who are the Nationalist Party, they said, whoa, guys, this is too far. But this is something that when you're not left with any good options, you start looking at, all right, you're going to call me a Nazi anyway. Let me start looking at what's on the table, because you're going to marginalize me no matter what I say. So now you and I are going to have a conversation within ourselves.
Well, there's a spectrum of remigration, and the darker side of the spectrum is much worse than that. So I don't think anyone listening would take any objection to deporting illegal immigrants.
Sure.
If you've broken the law to get somewhere, deport. You're not owed anything. then I think most of your listeners would agree that if you've legally emigrated somewhere, but you commit a heinous crime, or perhaps any crime, certainly a crime like murdering, or if you raping young indigenous girls, I think there's most people will say, yeah, you know what, we're not going to put you in our prison. We're going to deport you back to where you
Yeah,
came from.
and to be fair, 100% of my listeners think I should be deported. So let's just a country that no longer exists. But no, I ran a poll. It was unanimous. It was a very sad moment in my life. My mom agreed with them. I don't understand.
Then there's the Swedish have got a remigration policy where they're not forcing anyone. In fact, Trump's copying this. They're offering payment to leave. So it's like, we'll give you, it's the equivalent of something like £25,000, $30,000 or something per person if you leave voluntarily and renounce your citizenship. There's that side. And the AFD, in their official manifesto, said that's what they suggest. It's like, we're going to create voluntary. There's no forced expulsion of legal immigrants. But what's happening, not only online, but there was a big protest in Birmingham in Britain for this remigration. There's a French philosopher called Renaud Camus, who it was also in the headlines about a month ago because the Labour barred him from entry into Britain because of he would be a disturbance to peace. And he's written extensively about remigration, but he's saying remigration for those, even if you've been there for 5-6 generations, it doesn't matter. If you support Hamas or whatever it is, you've got to go. So then you're really getting into, I mean.
But hold on, let me also defend him broadly speaking, or that kind of thing. It's a very useful negotiating technique where if I go, Winston, I'm going to deport 6 generations of your family, and you're like, whoa. How about 2? It's like, all right, you got me, buddy. So a lot of times, I'm sure he means it, but it's also effective.
Yeah, that's part of the deal. That would be relevant,
exactly.
I think, if he was actually in a position, he was a politician,
right?
But he's not. He's a philosopher. He's not actually offering policy. He's talking from a sort of the theoretical point of view, and he's a writer really and a novelist as well. So, I'm not sure that quite applies to him, although I get your point.
Not to him. I'm just saying others who make this argument.
Certainly apply to others, but essentially the conversation has become an ethnac conversation, an ethno-nationalist conversation. So for me, it gets pretty ugly. And I've even heard people talking about sort of DNA testing, and then you're like, whoa, like this is not quite right. Like this is concerning. So how did we come to remigration? There was a point I was making before. I've forgotten.
I'm just saying that there's no real that basically people are just talking to each other because.
So I was talking about the shifting Overton window. So you see that shifting there. So the Overton window can shift in an ugly direction as well, and for me that would be an ugly direction. But I also think it's the case that, for example, here in Britain, a lot of the left-wing journalists, and this has happened as a consequence of Trump's victory, who have spent the last 10 years propagating woke identitarianism, have said they were wrong, and they might not, like, there's no contrition about it, but they kind of say it, or they'll say like, we're not wrong in like thinking it, but we're wrong that it doesn't actually end up in the results we want, So, but the point is that on woke identitarianism, there's been a big shift that even the lefties are saying, yeah, I think that battle has been somewhat won here. So things can change, and I never in my life have I experienced an Overton shift like Trump's second victory, which has really changed my my view on what is possible, and how politics can affect the culture. And so I think there's hope there
in the States
for Britain. If it can happen there, why can't it happen here?
Because we're not the same peoples.
But we're a people. So the point is, I'm talking about a phenomenon that's possible to any society.
It's not possible in any society. There's no way Trump could get elected in Japan, for example.
No, but it's not about necessarily Trump winning. What I mean is that the attitudes on a specific issue can shift dramatically. I'll give you another example. Before J.D. Vance said we've got
Give me a
25
British
million.
example. Give me a British
No,
example.
this is relevant to Britain.
Okay.
Before J.D. Vance said 25 million people, there are 25 million illegals we need to start deporting, which he said about halfway through last year. Before that moment, in Britain, it was completely political impossibility, a taboo to even suggest deportation, even for illegal immigrants. And
Sure.
Farage himself said that in an interview. He was asked, would you deport illegals? He's like, that's a political impossibility. But after the Trump victory in November, that completely changed the dialogue over here, where it's like, of course we can deport illegals. Like, that's obvious that we can deport illegals. And Farage is saying, yes, of course we're going to deport illegals. So America is influencing over here, and the Overton window is shifting over here as well. And so I do think it can change.
I agree with you that in some context, the Overton window is changing over there, but it's in the broader context of the Starmer door closing when people are getting arrested for tweets. So if this gets any traction, why wouldn't they start saying that deportation talk is Islamophobic? And if you start saying it, you're going to get locked up.
That it is the case that people are saying it, and they're saying it's Islamophobic. I get called Islamophobic. What did I get called? I got called Islamophobic just for saying that we have blasphemy laws, given the case of this.
I had Sargon on the show,
Yeah.
and he was talking about this, about it's racist. I go, is it fair to say, Carl, that you don't want 500,000 Frenchmen, in Britain every month, or 5,000 German? I mean, it's just ridiculous. The idea that any country in Europe, you're going to be fine with people who don't speak your language and share your culture, just come on board, is insane. I don't want Canadians in here. I mean, it's very easy for them to assimilate to America, other than the political attitudes, but it's just ridiculous. So I hear what you're saying about the Overton window, but I think what is happening, and I'm sure you agree, is that the glove is coming off the iron fist, and it's going to be a race in many ways over whether you can vote yourselves free, or whether they're just going to start locking more and more doors to make sure discussion itself is impossible. And historically speaking, I think, yeah,
we've been voting and voting and voting for against mass migration now, election after election after election. That's exactly what Brexit was about. And every time the people vote that way, they get the opposite. They get more immigration.
This happened in Germany this year, where the CDU, the Christian Democrats, who are the center-right party, Angela Merkel's party, they campaigned a bit about this. I think literally that on election night, Mertz, I think is his name, is like, yeah, we're not doing that. It was like so shameless, and the Germans like, what the heck are you talking about? And the thing is, it would be very easy. This is the AFD's big issue, and if they're concerned, and they're not entirely wrong, that there's this Nazi part of the AFD, it would be very easy for them to steal all of the AFD's thunder and just say, you know what? We're going to close the borders in Germany. This is ridiculous. Why is German supposed to be the hub for everyone around the world who's having a problem back home? And they wouldn't do it.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. They can't, though. It's too. Their philosophy is too deep within them. Their guilt, post-war guilt, is so strong that they just can't bring themselves. I mean, sorry, I'm going on a little tangent here, but Angela Merkel is really, so much of this is her fault.
Oh yes.
Her elite, not only did she let in 1 million Syrians, who, by the way, I've not heard anything about them going back since Jelani's come back to power. Not only that, but she did the deal with the Greens to end the nuclear program, the nuclear energy program. So she's basically, in a sense, the last ruler of Germany. I mean, she finished that country. And you're absolutely right. They could now. The Nazi component of AFD, having read the contract, as far as I could tell, there's nothing there that's really beyond just basic conservatism.
No, that's absolutely true. I'm just talking about there's certain members in the party.
But there are members who are.
And I'm not using that term in the American sense of like someone who likes Donald Trump. I'm using that term in that sense that we were the good guys in World War II kind of thing. And so this has been an issue for Alice, whatever her name is, Frankel. Yeah, the head of the party. One of the co-founders quit the party because of it. Frankie, for her last name. So this has been a thing going on there. It's a thing going on in Austria. And again, Americans, one of the things I hate about American media is that it's so America centered that everything in the rest of the world is viewed through a Republican and Democrat lens. And it's like these things don't port to the Republican and Democratic Party, especially in countries where we have six or more seats and six or more parties in parliament. And there's never, ever been a Nazi presence here in the States. But this has been a real thing, obviously, in Germany and other countries. So it means something different over there than it does over here.
It does. I'd also color in, Marine Le Pen, you mentioned earlier. I mean, she is literally a National Socialist. So that is absolutely the program.
Well, can you, one more question? Farage explain this to me. Farage said he wanted to nationalize the steel industry, which is
Yes.
something to the left of Bernie Sanders. Can you please explain that to us?
Yes, I can. So Farage has been a Thatcherite his whole life. When Liz Truss put out her budget, you mentioned earlier her economic program, and he said it was the best budget since Thatcher. So then, about 2 months or a month ago, British Steel, which is in a terrible way, he's like, we're going to nationalize. So it's like, whoa, this is like a socialist idea from a Thatcherite. But what you got to understand is at the moment, British Steel is owned by the CCP.
Okay.
So not only is it not in the private
Wait, literally?
but it's owned by a foreign state that happens to be communist.
Wait,
So,
is it, hold on. Is it literally owned by the CCP?
yes.
Oh, shit. Okay.
If not entirely, then
Largely,
I think
yeah.
in large part. So if you look at it from Farage, although I haven't heard this from him, but this is why I as someone who's vehemently against socialism, why I support this is I would much rather
Yes.
it was owned by the state than it was owned by a foreign communist. And
Yes.
adversary, but the CCP are also our enemy. So an adversarial state, not just anyone. And it also, and I'd add to that, and this is another perhaps socialist aspect of Reform UK and Farage, is that there are some public utilities which have been privatized, but even as private entities, they are monopolies, essentially. Right. And so if they are monopolies, then, for me, monopoly is as much of a problem as socialism. Maybe it's mildly more preferable, but socialism is state monopoly. So if it is in that sense of monopoly, then it's not that much of a swing to make it socialist. And this is relevant to, let's say, the water, or there's conversation also about the trains. I wouldn't be surprised if Farage says to nationalize the trains, but if he does such a thing, which would be very against his Thatcherite roots, it would be tied with bringing in AI to completely revamp. So it would be way cheaper to run the whole operations and far fewer people involved. So it would there would be kind of a completely upheaval in that specific sector. So folks, yeah, there are lefty aspects to Reform UK for sure.
And what people don't, which is surprising to hear, but the data bears this out, Farage always said, I'm not really left or right, I'm taking the best from both parties. And anytime there's a third party, they always blather that. But the votes, he's pulling more votes from Labor than he is from the Conservatives. Now, Labor had more to pull from, but the data is there, and it's kind of shocking to me because that would not happen here. If you had a Farage figure, which Trump kind of was, to have him pull more from the Democrats than for the Republicans, it's ridiculous on its face, but that is what's happening in the UK. So that's another example of how other countries are not analogous to the Republican-Democrat split, because this is something that would never happen here. And but it makes sense because a lot of these Labor voters are. Go ahead.
It did happen in America. Of the something like 12% of Bernie voters went over to Trump.
Yeah, but I'm saying is Farage is getting more from Labor than he did for the Conservatives.
Right. Yeah, well, another way of understanding why that is because a large part of that is the borders and the failure.
Well, I think a large part of that were people saying F the Conservatives after so many, in a binary system, if I hate A, I'm going to go with B. And he just got that group that said, all right, we hate the Conservatives, now we hate Labor. All right, we're open for
Yes,
discussion.
but then there would be a question: is why they're going to reform and not
Sure.
going to the Green Party, or the Lib Dems.
Right.
The Green Party are communist, and so you might say, well, they're actually closer to what the Red Wallers want.
That's
Although
true.
I'd say Red Wallers are smart enough not to want communism in Britain, even if they want socialism. And but part of that component is a sense that Farage understands British interests more, and there's a real feeling with Prime Minister Starmer that he doesn't. He's not acting in the interest of Britain when it comes to sovereignty, territory, culture, and the British people. And this goes back to the two-tier sense. So that's part of why Farage is winning red.
It's impossible, in my opinion, to look at the issues facing the UK right now, including Scotland and Ireland and Northern Ireland, and say the biggest problem in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, excuse me, right now is Islamophobia. You cannot say that with a straight face unless your priorities are completely disingenuous or contrary to the British people, including Muslim citizens of the Great Britain. It is not a possibility this is your biggest priority. Folks, head over to malice.locals.com where Winston took questions from supporting listeners. Winston, running out of time, what has been your favorite part of this interview?
I genuinely love. You know what? Part of
what? You know what?
I genuinely, because I was very familiar with your work before meeting you and following you when I was hiding and scared to say my opinions. And it's I'm really privileged not only to say that you're my friend and that we can have these great conversations, but that you would even say that about me. Is I thank God for the blessing of your friendship. So thank you, Michael. It's you.
You are mistaken.
Hey, it's James Altucher. I've been an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling writer, stand-up comic, and whatever it is I'm interested in, I get obsessed. Yes, it's led to success, but it's also led to such heartbreaking failure. I have failed more times than I can count. I wish in my life I had had people to talk to. That's why I started the James Altucher Show and bring on some of the most brilliant minds in every area of life. People like Richard Branson, Sarah Blakely, Mark Cuban, Danica Patrick, Gary Kasparov. And I wanted to find out exactly how they've navigated the highs, the lows, and everything in between. No fluff, just raw stories and real advice. I've talked to 1,500 of the most amazing people on the planet. So if you want to learn from the best and skip the same old canned interviews, we're all about helping you find your next big idea, level up your thinking, and ultimately to choose yourself. So let's do this together. Subscribe now to The James Altucher Show.
Are you looking for your next case? Pluto TV has all your favorite crime dramas streaming for free.
You're gonna need some backup.
Which means suspense is free.
Very cool.
Watch CSI New York, Criminal Minds, Blue Bloods, Tracker, FBI, and SWAT all for free.
You can't outrun this.
Someone is gonna pay for all this crime. But it's not gonna be you.
Take care of business, fellas.
Watch all the cases, all for free, from all your favorite devices.
We got you.
Feel the free. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.